Matt, how you doing?
Happy Monday, Joe. I guess it's technically not Monday while we're recording.
We can LARP like it's Monday.
That's
So,
right.
um,
Welcome, Tristan.
hey, what's up, Tristan? How you
Yeah,
doing?
thanks. I'm sorry that it's not Monday. I just for backstory for listeners, I was supposed to be here with you folks 4 days ago, but you would not have wanted to hear me at that point. I was like gonna have to hit the mute button and hack and cough, and
Ugh,
my nose wasn't really working, so it was better that
Yeah.
we skipped it.
sorry, man. No, you sound a lot better. I
Yes,
think
yes.
I think I gave a presentation once to the military, and I could barely talk the whole time Matt
Oh
was
yeah.
there. That sucked. That was not good. It's like we can't hear you. I'm like, I know.
Was it?
Doing the best I can.
Yeah,
I think I was at data council at the time trying to talk with all the background noise outside.
yeah,
Right,
you
Joe?
were.
So we
It
were
was such a
quite
shit
the.
show. Yeah, they're just like anyway. Well, cool. It's good to chat. I think right before we were talking, and this might be a good topic to start with. We were talking about a New York Times article that it came out yesterday. What was this article about?
Oh, I feel like it was WeWork that kind of made it uh, public news enough that it made it to the front page of the New York Times. But there have been a bunch of startup either bankruptcies or one form or another of failures. There, I would have to pull up the article to like remember all the companies' names. It mentioned WeWork and Convoy, and there was a what was the name of the meeting? That like
Hopin.
Oh,
virtual event.
Hoppin.
Hopin,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopin. Yep, that's another like big one. Do you remember any of the other names?
I'm pulling up the article right now, but yeah, Hoppin. I think they said it raised 1.6 billion at a valuation of 7.6 billion, and supposedly sold its main business for 15 million. So now I'm really curious about what went on behind the scenes for all of that to take place. But let's see, what else did they have here? Yeah, it's a long list. All of AI basically closed out. Convoy, of course. Vive, which is a home construction startup that I
Hmm,
hadn't heard of.
hmm.
Yeah, hold on,
Um,
just looking through it now. Yeah, and it says if
but
you're focused on AI, then of course this is not a problem. You're not worried about this.
yeah, it's the ever since inflation started ticking upwards and the Fed started going on its interest rate raising spree, the markets have reacted and multiples have come down, and that has meant that um, if the emperor was wearing no clothes, then it became apparent to everybody very quickly because you couldn't continue to fundraise at the levels that you had been fundraising at before. Um, so then you have to either conserve cash or you have to you get profitable or
Mhm.
the we have a high flying valuation, and this has been very top of mind for me. The last thing in the world that I would ever want is to see us in the list of names of companies who didn't
Yeah,
make it through that part of the process. But fortunately, um, in many ways, enterprise software and like data infrastructure is uh, a much more like nuts and bolts business than some of the other companies listed there. Like we were cast to sign these like long-term leases with landlords that have like these tremendous financial outlays, like uh, uh, obligate you to like 10 plus year terms, and you know there's different Hopin was all of their numbers were based on uh, a complete global anomaly of no one could leave their houses and still wanted to do events. And so what do you know, virtual event attendance is like doing real good, and we've seen this show up in our own virtual attendance numbers.
Mhm.
Two years ago we ran our event Coalesce uh, totally virtually, and the year before that as well, and our virtual numbers were like very strong. We were like, hey, this is the future of conferences. Why would we ever like all go to a hotel together again? But that's changed, and people want to go in person, and
Yep.
the virtual numbers are not as good anyway. I think our core business is like much more boring and normal and stable than some of these other businesses. So fortunately, we could get back to basics and are in a pretty good place. I'm not worried about showing up on that list.
That's great. What does getting back to basics look like for you?
Gosh, this is going to turn into a boring conversation very quickly, but
Perfect. We love boring conversations here. We spend all our time talking about data, so here we are.
I mean, seriously, like you have a business that started around an open source community, and that community grew organically for many years, and we, it was, I think, 3.5 years in that we first raised venture money, and we're now 7.5 years in, and the story of most commercial open source companies is that the first chunk of revenue comes pretty easily because there's this like pent up demand, and you're like, hey, there's finally a thing that you can buy, and people are like, cool, here's my credit card number, and so it happens very quickly. But then after that, you have to actually get good at repeatably selling and building the product, and sometimes the early hypergrowth actually makes that harder because we had to grow the team so quickly and build products so quickly to satisfy that early user demand that we oftentimes accomplished in 1 year what many startups would accomplish in even like very successful startups would accomplish in like 2 or 3 years. And so there's a lot of just like chaotic movement is that you try to make things happen as quickly as possible. So, the short answer to your question is just like focusing on basics is focusing on things like, our right now we're focused on our product discovery process. How do we like create this very smooth process for a new PM to say, I want to build a thing, and make that happen. We're focused on things like the core economics of our go-to-market. What does one sales rep produce, and is that economical, and how do we tweak these ratios and all this stuff? So if I don't write as many analytics engineering roundups as I used to, it's because I'm like my headspace is deeply in this world. But like that's how you build a long-term successful business. Is
Right.
as much as I would like to do nothing but talk about the internals of Snowflake and Databricks' most recent product launches. We also have to like get the basics right.
Yeah, and I'm sure, there is a big shift post-COVID and different pressures running a business. In fact, one of the things you brought up in the email notes before we decided to record today was the shift from being focused on a big user base to growing the revenue base. And I know for like a traditional B2C company like Facebook or Google, this is all about advertising. But of course, if you're in the like orchestration or data management space, it's a whole different game, right? Advertising is not really going to register there. So tell us a bit about what you were thinking in that context.
Yeah. I don't know. It was like a year or two in, and my wife is a pediatrician, and I said, gosh, there's more people using DBT than I anticipated. I don't know what to think about that. And she said, you should put ads in it. And I was like, I'm not sure that's how that works. I'm not sure like ads in a command line tool. So we don't have ads in DBT for sure.
That would be a weird experience, but
it would be a very strange experience. The short answer is that when you use DBT, there's a core set of things that you're doing, and they suggest a kind of next level of stuff. If you're using DBT, you need something to run it on an ongoing basis. You probably need a tool to view all the metadata that's coming out of it. You probably need CI checks. There's all these other things, and So the core of DBT has always been open source, and we feel strongly about that because we want the language itself to be something that you're not locked into. Programming languages generally are not things that you want to have somebody be able to kind of change their pricing model, and all of a sudden all of the however many tens of thousands of human hours you spent writing that code, it's just like not useful. But all the kind of tooling around it is stuff that we charge money for.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I mean, this has been a pretty common model for a long, long time. It's the tooling around it plus the support aspect, right? So
Yep.
Linux was one of the first really successful open source businesses. And the attitude was, hey, we're going to keep this pure open source in that case, but we're going to support it for you. And so we'll manage, the different checkpoints for you. And we'll give you like a golden set of bits that's more tested and tried and true.
You're
And we'll
talking
get
about
on the
Red
phone
Hat?
with you. Red Hat, for instance,
Yeah,
is probably
yeah.
the biggest example of this. Yeah.
There's the cohort of companies that was started a little bit before us that we tend to think about frequently when we look for prior art are companies like Databricks and Confluent and Mongo and
Yep.
Elastic, and they all have navigated this journey. I think different ones with varying levels of success. And there's certainly been bumps along the way for different ones. It's been nice for us because we've had those companies to learn from. HashiCorp's another one.
Yep.
And I think we've managed to avoid stepping into some potholes because we've gotten to learn from them. There was this whole relicensing period in like 2018, I think it was, where Elastic and Mongo and Redis
Oh, I remember this.
all
Yeah.
did major relicenses. This is when like the business source license and the I can't remember that. I think they all like invented their own licenses, but we've decided in almost all cases we've decided not to go down that path and have kept the core product permissive Apache to open source.
That's interesting. And I suppose walk me through this. I'm thinking in terms of moats, whatever that means in a product. But I imagine that as you're moving more towards focusing on the business, focusing on competitive moats. What does a real moat look like in software versus maybe a fake moat or a moat that could disappear really quickly? That's something I've been thinking about lately. I'd love your take on that.
This is, I think, this is like the question in software, and 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the question was, could you build something? It was very challenging to build the first versions of eBay or Amazon, and you can like read the histories of these companies, and in order to accept credit card payments online, it was freaking hard computer science work, and you like required C code for Amazon. But it's just like the technical challenges are not moats today. I mean, okay, maybe in a few cases they are. Maybe it is true that OpenAI has done some things that truly are technical moats and are hard to replicate. But even then, I mean, Google just released
Gemini.
I can't remember what the Gemini.
Yeah.
And so like you just can't rely on technical moats anymore. So the question is, what instead do you do? And I went to real business school back 15 years ago, and that was a good intro to the topic, but honestly you can get up to speed on this topic just by reading a single book. The folks on the Acquired podcast talk about this book every single episode. It's called 7 Powers. It's by a
That's
guy
it's a
named
really good book.
Hamilton Helmer. It's not long. It's like, I don't know, 180 or 200 pages, something
It's
like
dense
that.
though. It's dense. Every page you're just like, damn.
Yeah, you do want to like put it down and stop and think about it. But like, and I'm not going to be able to recall the 7 powers from the top of my head, but the different way that I think about that, I think about Apple a lot, because we're trying to run a playbook that is a little bit similar. Now, I don't want to like truly compare a tiny little 400 person company in data engineering to like the largest, most successful technology company ever. But like, you can see similar strategic elements, and that is to say that Apple's strategic moat is primarily about their ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
They have all these different touch points with customers, and they have invested in technology at each of these different touch points. And the power of the Apple ecosystem is such that anytime you adopt a new piece of Apple technology, it just works so freaking well. And so, every once in a while, my brother, who's an Android person, will try to convince me to switch over to a Pixel, and he'll be like, the new Pixel has this, that. I'm like, cool. I literally don't even care what new functionality just came out of the Pixel, because like, I have 3 different sets of AirPods. I have 2 Apple TVs. I have Mac. Like, all of this stuff just works together incredibly well. And that is a very powerful moat. And for us, my perspective on data engineering is that most of the time, people are spending their time on things that have no value whatsoever. They are plumbing, they are duct taping, and what we really need to be spending time on is thinking about business value. Like, what are the things that we're here to do that create business value? And so, and yet there's like all these different touch points. You think about data engineering. You need a data catalog. You need a CI tool. You need observability. You need all these different freaking things, and you don't really care. I mean, like, take data orchestration. Like, literally creates no business value, but you need it. If you don't have it, your stuff doesn't run. But you want to think about it as infrequently as possible. And so, what I want to do is increasingly make living in the dbt ecosystem feel like living in the Apple ecosystem, which is to say that the hard stuff just kind of like vanishes into the background, and you forget that was ever a problem, and you spend all your time thinking about business value.
Matt, you're writing a book on business value. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, data people in general, we need to think about business value a lot more. I think there's frankly also a level of training that needs to happen at the C level, which is to say we need to sometimes rethink about business value. You have the whole Welchian, just dollars and cents stock buybacks movement.
The Jack Welch?
Yes,
Welchian? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I recently read a book called The Man Who Broke Capitalism. Good book. Probably talk about it more in the future, but basically talking about how he undermined General Electric's investment in R&D. He undermined them as a technology leader. And I think when we're pitching data projects, there kind of need to be 2 parts to it. So we're still pitching technology, right? Like, not to your point, Tristan, not focusing on boring engineering stuff. We want to get that stuff out of the way as quickly as possible, but focus on how data can actually build better businesses. Not just on having the latest and greatest, release of Snowflake or something like that, but focus on how data can serve the core functions of the business, but not be so focused on just profits and dollars and cents that we say, oh, we don't want to invest that money because it's, we can just give it back to shareholders instead.
Interesting. This interesting thread too, I think that we sort of touched on earlier, which was the the early days of technologies like PayPal, right, and so forth. These are very high friction efforts, but now transactions are, you don't even think about it. Stripe, you just integrate it in and you're kind of done, right? Same with PayPal, actually, but it works really well. And it feels like the data tooling ecosystem and the data engineering ecosystem is it's coming a long ways. I don't think we would harken back to the days of MapReduce and going back that direction. Maybe some hipster will want to do that. I don't know. But it's let's actually bring back the old school data stacks. But I think you're absolutely right on in your your observation that these things just sort of need to work. I think, and then we wrote the book on data engineering. Like we feel like there's the trend right now is definitely towards higher levels of abstraction and ease of use. And this will, by proxy, force the data engineer again to focus on more valuable activities. As you point out, pipelines, that should just be there. But I mean, if the plumbing in your house was as creaky as a lot of our data pipelines, I mean, you would have a very terrible day. I mean, you're in the middle of a remodel project, or hopefully you're soon done with it. But
just finished, yeah.
Congratulations, by the way.
No,
I'm very
the plumbing
happy
is
for
not
you.
leaking. I guess the
So-
plumbing is all
Plumbing's
working.
doing great.
You don't
Yeah.
think about it. Great.
That's awesome. Yeah, but I mean, you're absolutely spot on. It's one of those things where in my perfect world, we would not be talking about data the way we do right now, and we'd be focused on the outcomes the data can provide. And but engineers want to engineer, right? I mean, that's sort of the paradox that we live in, where you want to put a command line in front of people so they can type things and feel like they're doing something.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's the problem is that sometimes we have, because 10 years ago the only way to build data pipelines was to employ people to deal with all this hard stuff, like to tune MapReduce. That we trained businesses to expect that. We trained an entire set of professionals to expect that. And in fact, that's not actually a great outcome. Like, that was a problematic outcome. That's why we moved towards cloud data warehouses and SQL and all this management stuff. But we should get our businesses to want to do that work less, and professionals to not see it as like their path to promotion.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know, Joe, what do you think about startups? I think some startups have figured this out and realized that they just need to use off-the-shelf tools and focus on their business outcomes, and also focus on, like, do I have a technology secret sauce? Is there something that I'm really, really good at that other people are not good at? Focus on that plus the business value, then they can succeed. And we've seen other startups where people maybe come from Google and they want to bring in all kinds of Google technical processes, and they want to be the best at technical processes. And generally, the latter type of startup really, really gets bogged down in the technical details instead of realizing.
We saw that one company that I think had Google engineers as their founding team, and they built everything using protobufs, like literally everything. And we're just like, you could use.
I mean, that's how Google works. Literally everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But our suggestion was there's a thing called Postgres. You could do that too, and it would save you a lot of time.
And JSON, right? Like, just use off the shelf, use what other people are using. Yes, it might cost you a bit more money, but it's going to save a ton of engineering time. And then when you're a big company, when you grow up, you can focus on being the best technically, maybe. But right now, this is maybe not the best use of your time.
How do you make that leap, though, Tristan, from being from where you are now to building an ecosystem that just works?
Yeah. Okay. So I think this is one of the most interesting things about the data ecosystem today. So you're talking about, we've been talking about the early days of the internet and early technology companies. And one of the things that happened in the 90s was that there was a lot of innovation in open standards, open protocols. And because these, there was kind of nothing at all. And then SMTP came out and everyone's like, oh, that works. Great. I'll use that. And then you saw, like, SMTP go from nothing to it was everywhere. And the same thing happened for, a small set of other protocols in the, late 80s, 90s. And these protocols were generally, like, pretty simple, straightforward, but they did an important thing and they got adoption. And that kind of hasn't happened in data in the same way. And the shape of the data ecosystem is often constrained by the set of companies who are innovating in that space and their respective incentives. And for a very long time, basically all the companies in data were enterprise software companies that sold tops down. And so they built software to satisfy RFP processes that had a lot of checklists that you needed to satisfy. And then you look at the software that was created as a part of that, and it did a lot of stuff, but it was pretty clunky and people didn't love using it. And so from my perspective, the most interesting thing about DBT, and you talk about a lot of different things, but the most interesting thing about where we sit in the overall landscape is that we are really the only kind of application level open standard that has gotten real traction. And in order to actually make a change in the world, you need to convince a very large number of people to do something in a new way. And that's literally the hardest problem in making any change to the world. A large number of people, convince them to do something in a new way. And so we have certainly, like, it's hard to tell exactly how many people use DBT today. From what we can tell, there's about 35,000 companies that use DBT every week. And probably you're talking about somewhere like 500,000 or 1 million users every week. And so that's not, everyone, but it's a lot of people, and from a data engineering part of the world. And we want to like move that into kind of, less technical folks over the coming, 12 plus months. And so then you start to say, like, well, what does that give us the right to do? And that's the moment in time that we sit at. And I think it's a really big opportunity, because so we just launched this thing called DBT Explorer. And okay, you look at DBT Explorer and you compare it to a fully featured data catalog like an Elation or a Calibra. And I mean, gosh, it's like David and Goliath. Like, our product is kind of a toy. But it does a lot of the things, the basic things that you want. And it is automatically in the hands of everybody who is in the DBT ecosystem. And that's really powerful. And so we want to continue to do that. We're not going to try to, build the most complex, best in class orchestration tool or best in class observer. But like, when you have a huge user group and you can say, like, hey, here's a really useful thing and it works with all these other things, then you get to kind of raise the bar on like just the set of tooling that everyone has access to.
Let me ask you about something that I don't think DBT is working on, but it's very adjacent and probably very important to you for this reason, because it's part of this ecosystem. And that is data exchange. So if I, as a company, have, processed some data, transformed it, I'm ready to serve it, and I want to exchange it with a partner or the customers, what are your thoughts on the state of the ecosystem around that right now, and how could we do better?
This is not a world that I spend a lot of time thinking about. I'm happy to like talk about it, but Matt, what has this top of mind for you?
I think a lot of things, what we've seen over and over again. So I think it's really nice that Snowflake makes it easier to exchange data between companies. The crux is still that if my, say, a business partner company is on BigQuery instead or using Redshift, then suddenly that's very hard. And so I'm kind of thinking in the context of open standards, like you're talking about, and how we're still, after all these years, we've gone to the cloud, but this is still a point of struggle, I feel like, for a lot of companies.
Yeah. The one of the things that we're thinking about internally is we launched this thing called DBT Mesh at Coalesce, and companies like large companies that use DBT really want to be able to kind of distribute ownership of their different DBT assets, and many of these companies have investments in multiple different data platforms, and it becomes very they're like data ecosystems become very bifurcated.
Yeah.
And but the funny thing is that's a software problem. It's not a atoms problem. Let's just say, in an example, you're running you're on AWS and you're running Athena and you're also running Snowflake. Well, it turns out that most likely both Athena and Snowflake are software running on inside the same set of computers inside of AWS in the same region, and they all could communicate using Blob Store and S3, and it's like actually data interchange between these platforms could be much easier. It's a software problem that can be solved. So one of the things that we're starting to think about is how do you take this mesh concept and make it really easy for different teams that are both using DBT to read and write each other's data, even if they're on different data platforms. And how do we kind of make that movement kind of seamless? And I think it's honestly not going to be that big of a lift for us to accomplish that. Now, I don't know how to use DBT as a standard to kind of solve the problem of like the atoms problem. Like if your data is sitting on US West over here and other data is sitting on a region in Germany, like that requires somebody else to solve.
Well, and there's the whole data egress problem too, the way
100%.
cloud vendors bill for network, which, Joe, you like to rant about that, I think, for good reason.
Well, it reminds me of cell phone minutes from the 90s. I kind of wish they would go away, but I keep thinking this will happen. It probably won't for a while. So, but once one vendor decides to do it, I think everyone else is going to follow suit pretty quick. But yeah, it's a topic for another day. I mean,
it's really crazy.
What's that?
I just was at Slush last week, and I called. Every day I would call my kids and my wife and check in and say hi, and it like doesn't even register to me anymore that like I can have traveled 7 time zones away and I can just like go to my phone and like click the same name and it just connects me. And I like the world of long distance is way behind us, and it's a super cool analogy for egress fees.
It reminds me a lot of that. Yeah, it's just a toll. And even egress fees between regions and stuff like this, it's just nuts. Different ways you can get charged and whatnot. It's but I mean, that's one big barrier. But what you're describing kind of reminds me of the if we take the Apple analogy, sort of like the sort of iCloud works, or maybe how actually you have 3 AirPods. I think I have the same number, and how handoff works. I have a million Apple devices, right? And they just
that's gotten way better. 2 years ago, it was a real pain in the ass.
It sucked.
Oh yeah,
it was so bad.
Like
now it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Now it's pretty good.
Yeah, you'd be like talking to someone on your phone, and then your AirPods would randomly reconnect with your Mac when you opened it to like work on a.
Oh yeah, that was us all the time. We'd be talking. Yeah,
and then like your phone would be in your pocket, and now the person's voice is actually like coming out of the speaker in your pocket. Yeah,
that's exactly it. Yeah. But what you're describing with DBT mesh kind of reminds me of that experience where it just sort of should seamlessly work, right? I think they dialed it in, as you pointed out, and it's but this is one of the big cruxes too, because there's a lot of complexity, especially as you get to bigger companies that just it's just the nature of the topology of how the teams and their stakeholders are set up. So it's that's interesting. What sort of spawned the idea behind a DBT mesh?
Oh, it's the same idea that kind of started the whole thing off, which is just most problems in data can be solved by analogizing to software engineering. And the problem that everybody was running into last year, and it ignited quite a lot of LinkedIn commentary and conspiracy theories and whatnot, is that the modern data stack was expensive, and nobody had really good control over what was running inside their data warehouse, and DBT was expensive because people were writing a bunch of code and no one knew what was happening, and the core insight was in fact correct. DBT projects or authors of DBT projects didn't have the tools that they needed to create really robust software architecture, and as a result, the answer anytime you needed something new done in your DBT project was just okay, go in there and build a new model, build 10 new models. And it was too hard to refactor what existed. It was too hard to create modularity at scale. And anytime you run into a problem, and we've been doing this for almost 8 years now, the answer isn't throw out the baby with the bathwater. The answer is okay, cool. We've got a system right now. It's working in a lot of ways, and there's some pathologies that it displays. What is the missing concept that we don't have? And for us, the missing concept was we needed DBT projects to map more similarly to microservices that were maintained by kind of two pizza teams. And the software engineers have tried let's have 2,000 people all maintain one code base together thing before, and that doesn't really work. And so there's 2 decades worth of software architecture thinking on how to do this well, and we certainly borrowed only the most high level concepts from it, and probably there's more learning to do there, but we needed to help people get out of this world where the only answer on how to do a new thing was make new models and schedule them to run along with everything else.
Yeah, that was part of the conversation we had and the other podcast that you and I did, Tristan, which was I think the big topic on your mind was just the amount of complexity and the amount of complexity sprawl, I think, more to the point, right? Yeah. Where I think you had one company that had 38,000 DBT models, or maybe more than that, actually.
Yes.
Just bananas. So.
Well, it really sounds like we're talking about don't repeat yourself, right? One of the ultimate classic rules in software development for probably the last 30 years, when was don't repeat yourself first coined. But yeah, it seems like there was a lot of repetition in DBT models. And so this is a very welcome change.
Well, the funny thing is, it's not like anybody wants to repeat themselves, but in a sufficiently complex organization, it's hard to know, okay, this model was built by this other human that I've never spoken to before. Why did they build it this way? If I change it, will they be pissed off at me? If I change it, will I break something? These are kind of hard questions to know the answer to, and almost always it is faster in the moment for that person to just make a new model instead of make a small change to the other model, and so that's what people end up doing. So you have to make it easier to do the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think semantic layers fit into maybe universalizing the vocabulary and context of a data within an organization?
I think that we are currently going through what will probably be a fairly short process as an industry of figuring out what's the best interface to feed context into a large language model that allows it to then be in dialogue with me about what's going on inside my company. And I think semantic layers, we've done some research recently, and others in the space have as well. Semantic layers significantly outperform just providing context via like raw schemas, like database schemas. When you want to feed them into the context window of an LLM, and so they become kind of the universal map to understand what's in your data landscape, and then you ask a question of an LLM, and it uses the semantic layer context to form a well-formed semantic layer request that then gets deterministically correct answers from the database, as opposed to probabilistically correct answers like everything else in LLM world. And that's, I don't know whether it's going to take over the world in the next 6 months, but I have a very hard time imagining that the way we thought about BI 2 years ago was going to be the same way that we think about BI in 5 years. Because wouldn't you just prefer to ask a question and get an answer?
Yeah, I think a lot of my time is spent talking to founders of companies. Actually, I had to put a kibosh on this earlier this week, but because everyone wants to show their latest LLM BI tool, right? Just now you can talk to your data. I'm like, yeah, but that's like the 100 other companies I just talked to earlier.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. I've got a couple of investments in that space, and then the company creation process just keeps churning out that company.
Yeah, that company. Yeah, like how you put it. Yeah, it's interesting too. I mean, you sent an article over about some research that was done by actually our mutual friend, One Cicada, knowledge graphs and SQL. And I actually caught his talk at the Alan Turing Institute over in London. I was there a few months ago, and it was fascinating. He's one of the people I think is leading the charge with knowledge graphs. I mean, the sad thing is he's been leading this charge, and it kind of felt like he was the lone man shouting at the sky for a while about knowledge graphs and semantic layers, and now it's I think he's having his finally time in the sun here. But it is fascinating. But the proof's in what he just researched. And I think they just Data World just wrote or launched their paper on that. But overwhelmingly, yes, the graphs and semantics layers do help with the hallucination problem. Doesn't completely solve it, but it's getting a lot better. So yeah.
And in general, what we're seeing on the semantic layer front is like really accelerating interest from real companies. So we started talking about this 2 years ago, and 2 years ago, you had kind of data Twitter and early adopters interested, and it was very much from the perspective of like, that's a very cool idea, and I could see why that could be powerful. Maybe I'll play around with it. But it turns out that like many folks in the like thought leadership community actually work at these like startups that have they have greenfield data stacks. Things kind of work, and so semantic layers are actually a little bit less valuable when everything's kind of clean and well organized. But they're extremely valuable when your data stack is heterogeneous. There's a lot of things going on in different places. It can be this very effective layer to kind of put on top of everything and kind of control the chaos. But so now we've seen the evolution towards, it's not, early adopters who are knocking on our door. It's people who run real organizations that suffer from these kinds of problems, and they're like, let's do it.
Yeah. In fact, it's interesting. I was talking with Sol Rashidi, she's a good friend of mine, but she was the chief data officer at a lot of big companies like that. And I think semantic layers is one of those things that's top of mind for her too, just because you guys should probably chat at some point. But it's the because it's sort of the glue that's going to hold everything together. And for some reason, we haven't had this for some reason, which is why, as you point out, there's a lot of complexity and just how we interact with data, how different departments kind of silo things off, and so that's interesting. What are when these companies talk to you, these real companies talk to you about semantic layers? Like, what's the conversation typically like?
Oh, geez, it's we're learning a lot about the different like minimum viable feature checklists that different types of organizations have. It's the kind of early days of any product where the things that are showing up for us right now are like, do you support our main BI tool? Okay, cool. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Power BI is one of the biggest asks we get in this part of the world, and we're getting to work on that. The second thing is caching. What does your caching solution look like right now, so that we can blow out our costs? And that's a thing that's like in a very near-term roadmap. And the third thing is permissioning. What is the permission model that you use to interact with the database? And is our security team cool with that? So those are like where, you get, it's pretty easy to get people bought into the pain point and the solution. That's actually like quite straightforward. And oftentimes it's actually easier to get people to understand that than understand like why DBT in the first place. People really understand the semantic layer problem. Sometimes people on DBT, they're just like, yeah, I don't know. We like write stored procedures, or we have some PySpark or whatever. And like, why is this better? And that becomes a challenging conversation for anybody who hasn't used the thing. But the semantic layer, people just like really get it. And then it becomes a conversation about like, okay, can we use the version of the thing that exists today, or should we talk again in a couple months?
I mean, to follow on, what do you think things will look like in a year? Like, where do you think DBT will be a year from now, and how will that interact with LLMs? Let me ask that too, just to throw in the buzzwords.
This is a year for us where we are not trying to plant any massive new tent poles. We're not trying to launch some like brand new thing that you haven't seen before. What we are trying to do is create a lot of new experiences inside of existing products. Here's the thing. Here's an example. We have 3 CI checks on our main internal analytics project, and DBT Cloud supports one of them, and the other 2 we roll via GitHub Actions. One is, I think one is SQL Fluff, and the other one's like DBT Project Evaluator, something like that. And I recently, did some work to meshify our internal analytics project, and as a part of that, I created a new project, and I had to set up CI for that. And it was a real pain. I had never used GitHub Actions before. There was a lot of config stuff that I had to learn. Like, that should just be check, check, check. Like, yes, I want to check using SQL Fluff. Yes, I want to use the project evaluator to, so there's a million things like that, that like within the existing product surface area, we need to like be filling things out, and it'll just make people who are already using the thing like just deliriously happy, because everything gets easier. On LLM specifically, I think that there's real opportunities for code gen, and we have people working on that like right now. There's a bunch of discrete workflows. There's the like, write me a new model based on this prompt workflow. There's the this code gave me this error, fix it for me workflow. There's the I just wrote this model, can you write all the YAML config needed to like test it, and etc. And I think that all of those are like very achievable experiences that don't require massive technical innovations today. They just require like applying existing technology to the problem.
That's really cool. I'm hearing a lot about these types of applications. And to me, 6 months ago, it felt like these were things that we were putting into web apps that weren't quite ready for prime time. It was kind of like, I want to raise more venture money, so I'm going to put some kind of LLM based thing into
Yeah,
my
yeah.
product. But now it feels like they're actually being used. I mean, I heard a couple of talks at Data Driven NYC actually earlier this week, and there was a discussion with Adobe about the maturity of their Firefly kind of suite of tools
Mm.
for generating images, which was kind of amazing. And then there was a panel from Moody's Analytics talking about how they're using retrieval augmented generation to power internal analytics, and just like really, really exciting stuff. So looking forward to seeing what you guys do with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like there was some kind of weird expectation that companies would have this stuff in their products within like 6 months of LLMs being shown to be like widely working. And I don't know, I just didn't feel that type. I had no interest in like launching an LLM feature that wasn't useful.
Right.
So I think that there's now enough prior art. We've now collected enough user feedback. Like we now know how to do this thing in a way that like is actually going to be useful, and so it's the right time.
That's super cool. I know we're coming up at the top of the hour here. Well, Tristan, it's been good chatting with you. And maybe one last question that I have before we kind of wrap up. How hands-on are you with getting your hands dirty with the code base? I mean, you mentioned that you're doing GitHub actions and stuff. I was a bit surprised by that. But
Yeah.
is this something you normally do? Seems kind of cool.
Yeah, I haven't been able to for a little while, but I recently hired a president COO, and his name's Brandon. He came from HashiCorp, and he's been a delight to work with. And Brandon now is responsible for the entire go-to-market part of our business, from sales to partnerships to marketing and field engineering, like all the customer-facing revenue-generating part of the business. And one of the reasons that I wanted to hire Brandon, other than the fact that he's way better at that stuff than I am, is that it gives me an opportunity to focus on the stuff that I'm actually really good at, which is making sure that I have hands-on product time, every month. And so
That's cool.
I took a couple full days after Coalesce and used all the new product functionality we just shipped.
That's so awesome.
And I plan on doing that every couple of months.
That's super cool. It's I'd say it's kind of unheard of too, Matt. We talked to a lot of people. It seems like the bigger the company gets, the founders kind of disconnected from the product. But that's really cool, because I think Matt will agree. This is something I think that should matter. But
Yeah. I mean, I've heard many people talk about when they move into management, even if you're just managing a whole team or a department, suddenly you lose some of that individual contributor time. And that's kind of very wrenching to do that. But I think sometimes people take it too far and say, okay, I'm the manager now. I'm not going to get into the product at all. I'm just going to ask my team about the features, and I'll tell them what features we should have, and then manage the tickets and such. And I think that's kind of a shame, because you really, to have the product vision, you want to be getting your hands dirty. You want to be right in the middle of things. I mean, that was Steve Jobs was famous for that. Maybe not on the technical level that you're talking about, but like actually interacting with the products and making sure that you like the experience and he felt like users would enjoy
with
the
maniacal
experience.
detail too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like this corner feels off. Like, go back and do it again. So
Yeah, I think that there's different stages in a startup's life cycle. I think that at first you're in the product all the time because you have to be, and then there's a million things that you have to do to make sure that the company like actually comes into existence, actually works. And you as CEO, you probably need to trust that there's other people who can do a lot of the product and engineering work. But then you kind of come through that, and you can start hiring leaders and trusting those leaders. And then, but you have to start asking yourself the question: what is it that I'm uniquely capable of? What do I, where do I add value here? And I spend a lot of time with folks like Ali Goetze at Databricks and Jay Krebs at Confluent, and those folks have very clear statements of like, here's why I am the CEO of this company right now. Here's the value I add, and so I think that every CEO needs to develop a statement on that at some point.
That's awesome. Well, Tristan, great chatting with you, and yeah, looking forward to what you are coming up with next year and the many years after. So
awesome.
Yeah,
I really appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah,
thanks for taking the time to come on.
Yeah. All right. Talk to you soon, man.